The massive training facility on Zephyr Station hummed with activity as Princess Lyrelei of the Altarian Empire walked through the corridors, her royal guard trailing behind her. The station served as the primary military academy for the Galactic Coalition, where the best warriors from dozens of species came to train together. Today, she was here to observe the final examinations of the elite combat program. Your Highness, Commander Vorthak, a towering reptilian saurian, bowed his scaled head respectfully. We are honored by your presence. The examinations are proceeding as scheduled. Princess Lyrelei nodded gracefully, her crystalline blue skin shimmering under the artificial lights. As one of the most powerful telepaths in the galaxy and heir to the Altarian throne, her visit carried significant political weight. The Coalition needed Altarian support for their ongoing expansion into the Outer Rim territories. I'm particularly interested in observing your human trainee, she said, her melodic voice carrying a hint of curiosity. I've heard interesting reports. Commander Vorthak's expression darkened slightly. Ah, yes, Marcus Chen, he's adequate, I suppose, though I must admit, Your Highness, I'm not entirely certain why the humans insisted on sending him here. His scores are mediocre at best, and he seems to lack the natural aggression necessary for elite combat training. They entered the observation deck overlooking the main training arena. Below them, various alien species were engaged in different combat scenarios. The princess's attention was immediately drawn to a human sitting alone on a bench, methodically cleaning what appeared to be an ancient projectile weapon. Marcus Chen didn't look like much, average height by human standards, which made him shorter than most other species in the facility. His brown hair was slightly unkempt, and he wore the standard gray training uniform that looked a size too large for his lean frame. While other trainees were engaged in loud displays of prowess, he sat quietly, his movements precise and economical as he maintained his weapon. That's him, Princess Lyrelei asked, unable to hide her disappointment. She had expected someone more impressive. Unfortunately, yes, Commander Vorthak replied. The humans claimed he was their best candidate, but frankly, Your Highness, I believe they may have sent him here as some sort of joke. His performance in standard combat drills is unremarkable. He doesn't possess the size advantage of a Goliathan, the speed of a Felixian, or the tactical processing power of an Axiom. He's just human. The princess watched as Marcus finished cleaning his weapon and began what appeared to be a meditation routine. His breathing was controlled, his posture relaxed yet alert. There was something about his stillness that seemed almost predatory, though she couldn't quite place why. What weapon is that he carries? She inquired. An ancient human projectile weapon, completely primitive by our standards. The humans call it an M1 Garand. It fires metal slugs using chemical propulsion. Most amusing, really, when you consider that we have plasma rifles and quantum disruptors at our disposal. Other trainees began filing into the arena for the final examination. There was Crix, a massive Goliathan whose stone-like hide could deflect most energy weapons. Beside him stalked Vera, a Felixian whose feline grace and razor-sharp claws had earned her the nickname Shadow Strike. The Axiom Collective had sent their finest tactical mind, a being called Node 7, whose multiple consciousness streams could process dozens of combat variables simultaneously. These were the elite, the best warriors their species had to offer. Each one had scored in the top percentile of every combat assessment. Each one had demonstrated why their species had earned respect throughout the galaxy. And then there was Marcus, who seemed content to sit quietly until called upon. Attention trainees, Commander Vorthak's voice boomed across the arena. Today's final examination will be a free-form combat scenario. You will be dropped into a hostile environment simulation where you must survive for 6 hours while achieving specific objectives. Your performance will determine your final ranking and placement within Coalition forces. The trainees began selecting their equipment from the advanced armory. Crix chose a plasma cannon designed for his massive frame. Vera selected twin quantum blades that hummed with lethal energy, interfaced with a sophisticated battle computer that would provide real-time tactical analysis. Marcus picked up a simple combat knife and a small pack containing what appeared to be basic supplies. His ancient rifle remained slung across his back. Isn't he going to choose any real weapons? Princess Lyrelei asked, genuinely puzzled. This is exactly what I mean, Your Highness, Commander Vorthak said with evident frustration. He consistently makes poor strategic choices, We've tried to guide him toward more effective weaponry, but he insists on using those primitive tools. The simulation began, and holographic environments materialized around each trainee. They found themselves in what appeared to be a hostile jungle environment, complete with dangerous predators and environmental hazards. Hidden throughout the terrain were objectives they needed to secure while avoiding or eliminating various threats. Princess Lyreley watched through the monitoring systems as each trainee began their approach. Crix charged through the undergrowth, his plasma cannon obliterating everything in his path. Vera moved like liquid shadow, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to dance between threats with deadly grace. Had already calculated optimal routes and was methodically working through objectives with machine-like efficiency. Marcus had found a tree and climbed it. He now sat motionless on a thick branch, simply observing. Is he taking a nap? Princess Lyreley asked incredulously. This is unfortunately typical behavior, Commander Vorthak replied. He often seems to lose focus during exercises. The other instructors believe he may simply lack the competitive drive necessary for military service. But as they watched, something interesting began to happen. While the other trainees made rapid progress initially, they soon began encountering unexpected complications. Crix's direct approach had attracted the attention of several large predators that his sensors hadn't detected. Vera's speed was being countered by acidic plant life that could react faster than her reflexes. Node 7's calculations were being disrupted by environmental factors that didn't match the simulation's base parameters. Marcus remained in his tree, occasionally raising what appeared to be primitive binoculars to observe different areas of the simulation. He seemed to be mapping something, though what wasn't clear from his minimal movements. What exactly is he doing up there? Princess Lyreley asked. Your guess is as good as mine, Your Highness. This is why his instructors find him so frustrating. He doesn't seem to take anything seriously. 2 hours into the simulation, the first major incident occurred. Crix had become surrounded by a pack of simulation predators whose adaptive AI had learned to counter his plasma cannon's effectiveness. His position was becoming untenable, and his life signs indicated significant stress. That's when Marcus moved. He didn't climb down from the tree. Instead, he jumped, dropping nearly 30 feet to land in a perfect roll that absorbed the impact. Before Princess Lyreley could even process what she'd seen, he had covered the distance to Crix's position with a fluid sprint that seemed to flow around every obstacle in his path. The pack of predators that had been systematically wearing down Crix's defenses suddenly found themselves facing something they hadn't encountered before. Marcus didn't use flashy weapons or overwhelming force. Instead, he seemed to simply appear in exactly the right place at the right time. A blade would flash, and a predator would fall. He would shift position by mere inches, and a claw strike would miss by a hair's breadth. How is he moving like that? Princess Lyreley breathed. Commander Vorthak was leaning forward, his usual composure forgotten. I'm not entirely certain. His movement patterns don't match anything in our tactical databases. Within minutes, the pack that had been overwhelming Crix was scattered or eliminated. But Marcus didn't stop to celebrate or even acknowledge Crix's grateful thanks. He had already identified that Vera was in trouble on the other side of the simulation zone. The acidic plants that had been countering her speed advantage were actually vulnerable to cold. Marcus had somehow determined this, and was carrying a piece of equipment he'd fashioned from materials in his basic supply pack. As he reached Vera's position, he deployed what appeared to be a primitive cooling device that neutralized the plant's reactive capability. Where did he learn to improvise technology like that? Princess Lyreley asked. That's not in any of our training curricula, Commander Vorthak admitted, his earlier dismissive attitude completely gone. But the most impressive demonstration was yet to come. Node 7, despite its advanced computational abilities, had become trapped in what appeared to be a logical paradox built into the simulation. The AI environment was feeding it contradictory data that was causing processing loops in its collective consciousness. Marcus approached the Axiom's position and did something unprecedented. He turned off his communication devices and sat down next to Node 7. Then he began to speak, though no one could hear what he was saying through the monitoring equipment. Whatever Marcus was telling the Axiom, it was working. Node 7's processing indicators began to stabilize, and within minutes it had broken free from the logical trap. How did he know how to counter an axiom processing loop? Commander Vorthak asked, though he clearly didn't expect an answer. That's advanced xenopsychology that even our specialists struggle with. The remainder of the simulation played out like a carefully choreographed dance. Marcus seemed to be everywhere he was needed, providing exactly the right assistance at precisely the right moment. He didn't dominate the exercise or overshadow the other trainees. Instead, he elevated their performance, allowing each of them to overcome challenges that would have been impossible alone. When the simulation ended, all 4 trainees had not only survived the full 6 hours, but had achieved every objective with time to spare. It was an unprecedented result that had never been accomplished by any previous group. As the trainees emerged from the simulation pods, Princess Lyreley watched Marcus carefully. He wasn't celebrating or boasting about his performance. Instead, he was quietly checking on the other trainees, ensuring they had recovered properly from the exercise. His demeanor remained exactly the same as when she'd first observed him. Calm, unassuming, utterly unremarkable. "Commander Vorthak," Princess Lyreley said slowly, "I believe there may be more to this human than initially meets the eye." The commander was reviewing the simulation data with obvious confusion. "Your Highness, according to these readings, his individual combat scores were still mediocre. But somehow, the group performance metrics indicate he was the decisive factor in their success. I don't understand how that's possible." Princess Lyreley found herself studying Marcus with new interest. Among her people, telepathic ability was prized above all other talents. She had always assumed that mental strength was the ultimate form of power. But watching this human had introduced her to something she'd never encountered before. Someone whose strength seemed to come from understanding others rather than dominating them. "I think," she said thoughtfully, "that we may need to reconsider how we define strength." As the observation session concluded and they prepared to leave, Princess Lyreley noticed something that made her pause. Throughout the entire afternoon, despite being in a facility filled with some of the galaxy's most dangerous predators in training, every single one of them had given Marcus a wide berth. Not out of fear or hostility, but with the unconscious respect that prey species show to an apex predator. And Marcus seemed completely unaware of it. That night, as Princess Lyreley returned to her quarters aboard the royal transport, she found herself unable to stop thinking about the unassuming human. There was clearly much more to Marcus Chen than anyone had realized. Tomorrow, she decided, she would request a private meeting with him. She had a feeling that conversation would be very enlightening indeed. Princess Lyreley waited in the small conference room aboard Zephyr Station, having requested a private meeting with Marcus Chen. She had spent the night researching everything available about humans in the Coalition databases, but the information was surprisingly limited. Most entries focused on their recent admission to the galactic community and their unusual insistence on maintaining their primitive weapons alongside advanced technology. The door chimed softly, and Marcus entered. Up close, he seemed even more unremarkable than he had from the observation deck. His brown eyes were alert but not particularly striking, his posture relaxed without being careless. He wore a clean version of the standard training uniform, and his ancient rifle was nowhere to be seen. "Your Highness," he said with a respectful nod, though not the deep bow most species offered her. "You wanted to see me." "Please sit," she gestured to the chair across from her. As he settled down, she activated her telepathic abilities to get a read on his mental state. What she encountered made her gasp audibly. "Nothing." Not empty nothing, like speaking with an axiom whose thoughts moved too quickly for organic telepathy to follow. Not hostile nothing, like the mental shield some species had developed to counter telepathic intrusion. This was something else entirely. It was like looking at a perfectly calm lake surface that somehow refused to reveal any depth beneath. "Is something wrong, Your Highness?" Marcus asked, his tone genuinely concerned. "No, forgive me," she replied, struggling to regain her composure. In her entire life, she had never encountered a mind she couldn't read at least partially. "I wanted to discuss your performance in yesterday's examination." Marcus tilted his head slightly, looking genuinely puzzled. "Was there a problem with it? I thought the exercise went well. Everyone completed their objectives." "That's exactly what I wanted to discuss. Your individual scores were recorded as average, yet your presence clearly elevated everyone's performance dramatically. How did you do that?" "I helped where I could," Marcus replied simply. Crix was facing multiple opponents, so I provided support. Vera needed environmental assistance, and Node 7 was experiencing processing difficulties. It seemed like the obvious thing to do. Princess Lyrale leaned forward, studying his expression carefully. But how did you know exactly what assistance to provide? How did you know that the acidic plants were vulnerable to cold, or how to break an axiom processing loop? Pattern recognition, mostly, Marcus said, as if this explained everything. The plants showed thermal stress indicators when the ambient temperature dropped. As for Node 7, they were stuck in a recursive loop because the simulation was feeding contradictory spatial data. I just suggested they ignore the environmental input and navigate by internal mapping instead. Just suggested, Princess Lyrale repeated incredulously. Do you have any idea how advanced that kind of xenopsychological intervention is? Most coalition specialists spend years learning to interface properly with axiom consciousness patterns. Marcus looked genuinely surprised. Really? I mean, they were obviously stuck because they were trying to process two different versions of the same information. Anyone would get confused by that. The princess felt a chill run down her spine. Either this human was being deliberately modest, or he possessed intuitive abilities that were far beyond anything in the coalition's understanding. She decided to probe deeper. Marcus, if I may ask, what exactly was your role on Earth before you came here? I was a park ranger, he replied without hesitation. I worked in Yellowstone National Park, mainly doing wildlife management and visitor safety. Wildlife management, she repeated slowly. What did that involve? Oh, the usual things. Tracking animal movements, predicting behavior patterns, managing predator-prey relationships, ensuring ecosystem balance. Sometimes I'd have to relocate dangerous animals that had gotten too close to populated areas, or help lost hikers who'd wandered into dangerous territory. Princess Lyrale felt pieces of a puzzle beginning to click into place. And this work required you to understand multiple species' behavior patterns. Of course, Yellowstone has everything from massive grizzly bears to tiny ground squirrels, plus seasonal migrations of dozens of different species. You learn to read the signs pretty quickly, or people get hurt. The signs, she murmured. What kind of signs? Marcus seemed to warm to the topic, his previously modest demeanor shifting slightly. Body language, territorial markers, stress indicators, dominance displays, fear responses. Animals are constantly communicating, you just have to know how to listen. A bear that's protecting cubs moves differently than one that's just looking for food. A wolf pack has different dynamics when they're hunting versus when they're traveling. Once you understand the patterns, predicting behavior becomes second nature. The princess felt her understanding of the previous day's events shift dramatically. Marcus, when you were observing the simulation from that tree, what exactly were you doing? Mapping the behavioral patterns, he replied matter-of-factly. The simulation predators were following realistic hunting protocols, so I wanted to understand their territorial boundaries and pack dynamics before anyone triggered a major response. It seemed like the smart thing to do. And when you helped the other trainees, they were exhibiting classic stress behaviors. Crix was showing the fight-or-flight response that most large species display when overwhelmed. Vera was displaying the rapid movement patterns that smaller predators use when they feel trapped. Node 7's body language indicated cognitive overload, which is pretty universal among higher intelligence species. Princess Lyrale sat back in her chair, trying to process what she was hearing. You're telling me that you treat other sentient species the same way you would wild animals. Marcus looked uncomfortable for the first time since entering the room. That's not exactly how I'd put it. It's more like recognizing that behavior patterns exist at a deeper level than just intelligence. Whether you're dealing with a grizzly bear or a Goliathan warrior, certain stress responses are going to be similar because they serve the same evolutionary purpose. And you learned this from working in a park. Earth's parks are more complex than most people realize, Marcus said, his tone becoming more serious. Yellowstone alone covers over 2 million acres and contains some of the most dangerous predators on our planet. Grizzly bears can weigh over 800 pounds and run faster than most vehicles. Wolf packs coordinate hunting strategies that would impress military tacticians. Mountain lions are ambush predators that can kill with a single strike. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Working in that environment, you develop certain instincts. You learn to move through apex predator territory without triggering aggressive responses. You learn to recognize when something dangerous is about to happen, usually before the animals themselves realize it. You learn to project the right kind of presence to avoid conflicts. The right kind of presence, Princess Lyreley repeated. Suddenly, her observation from the previous day made perfect sense. Every apex predator in the training facility had given Marcus space not because they feared him, but because he was unconsciously signaling that he belonged in their world. "This is why you carry primitive weapons," she said, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. Marcus nodded slowly. "Advanced weapons are powerful, but they're also loud, energetically speaking. They announce your presence and intentions from a great distance. In really dangerous territory, sometimes the best strategy is to move quietly and only reveal your capabilities when absolutely necessary. But surely you must have trained with advanced weapons during your time here." "Of course, I'm qualified on all standard coalition weapon systems, but—" He paused, looking thoughtful. "Plasma rifles and quantum disruptors are excellent for open warfare against known enemies. But when you're not sure what you're facing, or when you need to operate in close proximity to allies, sometimes simpler tools are more effective." Princess Lyreley was beginning to understand that her initial assessment had been catastrophically wrong. Marcus wasn't a mediocre trainee who had been lucky in the simulation. He was something far more dangerous, a specialist who had been trained by the most ruthless teachers in the universe, apex predators in their natural environment. "The human military didn't send you here for training, did they?" she asked quietly. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had lost its casual tone. "Earth's governments are still figuring out how to integrate with galactic civilization. Most of our military traditions don't translate well to multi-species operations. They thought it might be useful to have someone here who could serve as a cultural bridge, I suppose. A cultural bridge who happens to be trained in apex predator psychology." "Something like that." Princess Lyreley found herself reevaluating everything she thought she knew about humans. "Marcus, in your professional opinion, how dangerous would humanity be if they decided to become hostile?" Marcus was quiet for an uncomfortably long time. "Your Highness, I think that's a question you'd be better off not having answered." The response sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the station's environmental controls. It wasn't a threat or a boast. It was the calm, professional assessment of someone who understood predator behavior better than anyone else in the facility. "I see," she said carefully. "And what about you personally? How dangerous are you?" Marcus met her eyes directly for the first time during their conversation. For just a moment, she caught a glimpse of something behind his mild exterior that made her instinctively lean back in her chair. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual unassuming demeanor. "I'm just a park ranger, Your Highness. My job is to keep people safe and maintain the balance of the ecosystem. Nothing more, nothing less." But as he said it, Princess Lyreley realized that in his mind, Zephyr Station was just another ecosystem that needed to be kept in balance. And he had unconsciously assigned himself the role of apex predator. The meeting concluded shortly after, with Marcus politely excusing himself for his next training session. Princess Lyreley remained in the conference room for nearly an hour, trying to process what she had learned. She had come to Zephyr Station expecting to observe routine military exercises. Instead, she had discovered that humanity had quietly placed what amounted to a wilderness expert among the galaxy's most elite warriors. And that expert was studying them the same way he would study wolves or bears. More disturbing was the realization that he was probably learning things about their behavior patterns that even they didn't know about themselves. That evening, Princess Lyreley requested access to the training facility's security footage from the past month. She wanted to review Marcus's interactions with other trainees from a new perspective. What she discovered confirmed her worst fears. Marcus wasn't just observing and adapting to the behavior patterns of other species. He was unconsciously training them, the same way an experienced ranger might manage wildlife in a park. A suggestion here, a demonstration there, always subtle, always appearing helpful rather than manipulative. The other elite trainees, some of the most dangerous individuals their species had to offer, were being managed by a human park ranger, and they had no idea it was happening. As she watched footage of Marcus casually redirecting aggressive disputes before they could escalate, or unconsciously positioning himself to break up potential conflicts. Princess Lyrelay realized that humanity had sent them something far more sophisticated than a simple trainee. They had sent them a shepherd, and everyone else in the facility had unconsciously accepted the role of sheep. 3 days after her revelatory conversation with Marcus, Princess Lyrelay was reviewing diplomatic protocols in her quarters when the emergency alarms began blaring throughout Zephyr Station. The harsh red lighting and urgent klaxon signals indicated a critical threat level that she had never experienced before. Her personal guard burst through the door, their weapons already drawn. "Your Highness, we need to get you to the evacuation pods immediately," Captain Thurrows said, his usual calm demeanor replaced by obvious urgency. "What's happening?" she demanded, even as she allowed herself to be escorted toward the emergency corridor. "Unknown vessels have emerged from hyperspace," Captain Thurrows explained as they moved quickly through corridors filled with running personnel. "They're not responding to communication attempts, and their weapon signatures are unlike anything in our databases. The station's defensive systems are preparing for engagement." They reached the evacuation bay to find it in chaos. Hundreds of personnel were attempting to reach escape pods, while security forces tried to maintain order. Princess Lyrelay could see through the massive viewport that 3 enormous ships had indeed appeared near the station. They were unlike anything in Coalition design archives, organic-looking vessels that seemed to pulse with their own internal light. "Your Highness," Commander Vorthak appeared at her side, his usually immaculate uniform disheveled. "We're implementing immediate evacuation protocols. These ships appeared without any hyperspace signatures that our sensors could detect." "What about the trainees?" Princess Lyrelay asked, suddenly thinking of Marcus and the other elite candidates. "They're being evacuated with everyone else," Commander Vorthak replied, though his attention was clearly focused on the tactical situation developing outside. That's when Princess Lyrelay noticed something that made her blood run cold. Through the viewport, she could see the alien vessels beginning to deploy what appeared to be boarding craft, dozens of smaller ships that moved with the same organic fluidity as their parent vessels. "They're not trying to destroy the station," she realized aloud. "They're trying to capture it." Commander Vorthak's expression darkened. "That's what our tactical analysis suggests, but we have no idea why or what they want." The evacuation process was taking longer than expected. Too many personnel, too few escape pods, and the growing realization that the alien boarding craft were moving to intercept evacuation routes. Princess Lyrelay watched with growing horror as several escape pods were caught by strange energy fields that seemed to simply absorb them. "The pods aren't escaping," she said. "We're aware of the problem, Your Highness," Commander Vorthak replied grimly, "but we're not sure what alternatives we have." That's when Princess Lyrelay noticed Marcus. While everyone else was either rushing toward evacuation points or manning defensive positions, he was standing perfectly still near one of the tactical display screens, studying the alien ship movements with the same calm attention she had seen him use during the simulation exercise. She broke away from her escort and approached him. "Marcus, what are you thinking?" He didn't look away from the display. "They're hurting us," he said simply. "These ships aren't positioning for optimal attack formations. They're using standard Predator encirclement tactics." "Predator tactics? Look at their positioning," Marcus pointed to the display. "They're not trying to maximize firepower or create crossfire opportunities. They're controlling escape routes and channeling our movement patterns. It's exactly what a wolf pack does when hunting elk." Princess Lyrelay studied the display with new eyes. When viewed from Marcus's perspective, the alien formation did indeed resemble a hunting pattern rather than a military assault. "If they're hunting us," she asked, "what does that make us?" "Prey," Marcus replied without hesitation. "But not for killing, this is a capture pattern." "How can you be so certain?" For the first time since the crisis began, Marcus looked directly at her. "Because I've used this exact same strategy to capture dangerous animals for relocation. The energy fields that are stopping the escape pods, those aren't weapons, they're nets." The implications of what he was saying hit her like a physical blow. "You're saying these aliens are treating us like wild animals. From their perspective, that's probably exactly what we are." The conversation was interrupted by a new development. The alien boarding craft had reached the station and were beginning to attach themselves to various hull sections. Through the security monitors, they could see strange beings emerging from the craft, tall, graceful creatures that moved with an unsettling fluid motion. "All defensive teams to positions," Commander Vorthak's voice echoed through the station's communication system. "Prepare to repel boarders." Marcus was studying the security feeds with intense concentration. "This is wrong," he murmured. "What's wrong?" Princess Lyreley asked. "They're not attacking the defensive positions. Look at their movement patterns. They're avoiding direct confrontation wherever possible. They're searching for something specific." On the monitors, they could indeed see that the alien boarders were bypassing armed security teams whenever possible, instead moving methodically through different sections of the station, as if looking for something particular. What could they be searching for? Princess Lyreley wondered aloud. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Then his eyes widened slightly. "The training records, they're heading for the educational databases." "Why would they want training records?" "Think about it from a zoologist's perspective," Marcus said, his voice taking on the same tone he'd used when explaining animal behavior. "If you discovered a new ecosystem with multiple apex predator species coexisting peacefully, what would be the first thing you'd want to study?" Princess Lyreley felt a chill of understanding. How they interact with each other. Exactly. This station represents something unprecedented in galactic history, multiple dominant species training together, sharing knowledge, operating as a coordinated unit. To an external observer, we'd be fascinating. The security monitors showed alien search teams reaching the station's central computer core. But instead of destroying anything, they appeared to be carefully interfacing with the systems using technology that was far more advanced than anything the Coalition possessed. "They're downloading everything," Commander Vorthak said, his voice carrying a note of despair. "Training protocols, species behavioral data, tactical analyses, everything we know about multi-species cooperation." Marcus was studying the alien boarders' movement patterns with professional interest. "They're not hostile," he said suddenly. "What do you mean, not hostile?" Commander Vorthak demanded. "They've invaded our station." "No," Marcus replied calmly. "They've captured specimens for study. There's a difference." To illustrate his point, he gestured toward the security monitors. "Notice that despite having overwhelming tactical superiority, they haven't killed anyone. Every defensive position they've neutralized used non-lethal suppression methods. They're being very careful not to damage their specimens." Princess Lyreley realized he was right. The alien boarders were using sophisticated stunning weapons that incapacitated defenders without causing permanent harm. Their movements were methodical and careful, more like scientists collecting samples than soldiers conducting an assault. "If they're studying us," she asked, "what happens when they're finished?" Marcus's expression became grim. "Depends on what kind of researchers they are. Some catch and release, others." He didn't finish the sentence. The alien search teams had completed their data collection and were now moving toward the populated areas of the station. On the monitors, they could see the graceful beings approaching the evacuation bay, where hundreds of Coalition personnel were still trapped. "We need to do something," Princess Lyreley said urgently. "Do what exactly?" Commander Vorthak asked. "Our weapons are ineffective against their technology, our escape routes are blocked, and we're completely outnumbered." Marcus was staring at the monitors with intense concentration. Suddenly, he straightened up. "I have an idea, but it's going to require everyone to trust me completely." "What kind of idea?" Princess Lyreley asked. "If they're treating us like animals," Marcus said slowly, "then maybe we should behave like animals, specifically like animals that are too dangerous to capture safely." Commander Vorthak looked skeptical. "You're suggesting we fight them?" "No," Marcus replied. "I'm suggesting we make them think we're not worth the risk." Before anyone could ask what he meant, Marcus activated the station's general communication system. His voice echoed throughout Zephyr Station, reaching every person still aboard. "Attention all personnel. This is Marcus Chen. I need everyone to listen very carefully and do exactly what I'm about to tell you." Princess Lyreley watched as Marcus began issuing instructions that seemed to make no sense. He was telling people to move to specific locations, adopt particular postures, and make certain sounds. To anyone listening, it would have seemed like complete nonsense. But Princess Lyrale was beginning to understand. Marcus wasn't giving random instructions. He was choreographing a display. On the security monitors, they could see the alien researchers encountering groups of coalition personnel who were now behaving in ways that clearly confused them. Instead of the cooperative, organized behavior they had observed in the training records, they were witnessing what appeared to be chaotic, unpredictable responses. Marcus had instructed different species to display their most intimidating natural behaviors simultaneously. Goliathans were demonstrating their stone-cracking strength by destroying furniture. Felixians were showcasing their predatory grace in ways that suggested barely controlled aggression. Axiom units were generating overlapping data streams that created confusing interference patterns. Most importantly, he had positioned himself and the other human trainees throughout the station in ways that made them appear to be the coordinators of this aggressive display. "What exactly are you showing them?" Princess Lyrale asked. "A apex predator pack protecting its territory," Marcus replied, monitoring the alien researchers' reactions carefully. From their perspective, they just discovered that what looked like a peaceful research facility is actually a training ground for coordinated apex predators. On the monitors, they could see the alien researchers becoming increasingly agitated. Their fluid, graceful movements were becoming more urgent, and they appeared to be communicating rapidly among themselves. "It's working," Commander Vorthak said with amazement. "They're withdrawing." The alien boarding craft began detaching from the station with the same swift efficiency they had shown during the initial approach. Within minutes, all the boarding parties had returned to their ships. But Marcus wasn't relaxing yet. He was watching the main alien vessels with intense focus. "What are they doing now?" Princess Lyrale asked. "Deciding whether we're worth the risk," Marcus replied. "If we're lucky, they'll conclude that we're too dangerous to study safely. If we're unlucky." The alien ships remained motionless for several tense minutes. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, they vanished. No hyperspace signatures, no energy discharges, they simply ceased to exist on the station's sensors. The emergency alarms fell silent, leaving Zephyr Station in an eerie calm. "How did you know that would work?" Princess Lyrale asked Marcus once the immediate crisis had passed. "I didn't," Marcus admitted. "But I've seen what happens when researchers encounter apex predators in the wild. Usually, the smart ones decide that some specimens are too dangerous to be worth collecting." Commander Vorthak approached them, his expression a mixture of gratitude and unease. "Chen, that was either brilliant tactical thinking or incredible luck." "Probably both," Marcus replied with his characteristic modesty. But Princess Lyrale was studying him with new understanding. What Marcus had just accomplished required an intuitive grasp of predator psychology that went far beyond anything she had imagined possible. He had successfully convinced an advanced alien species that humanity and its allies represented a coordinated apex predator threat. More than that, he had done it by recognizing that the aliens' behavior patterns, however advanced their technology, still followed basic biological imperatives that existed across all species. "Marcus," she said quietly, "when you said earlier that humanity might be dangerous if they became hostile, you weren't talking about their weapons or their military tactics, were you?" Marcus looked at her with those calm, brown eyes that had fooled everyone into thinking he was just an ordinary trainee. "No, Your Highness, I wasn't. You were talking about their ability to understand and predict the behavior of other apex predators. Among other things." Princess Lyrale felt a complex mixture of relief and concern. The immediate crisis was over, but she now understood that humanity's integration into galactic civilization was going to be far more complicated than anyone had anticipated. Earth hadn't sent them a trainee or even a cultural liaison. They had sent them a demonstration, a quiet, unassuming proof that humans understood the fundamental nature of apex predator behavior better than any other species in the galaxy. And now, thanks to the alien researchers who had downloaded all of Zephyr Station's training records, that information was spreading to other parts of the galaxy. As Princess Lyrale returned to her quarters that evening, she realized that her original mission, to evaluate humanity's potential role in coalition military operations, had become far more complex than she had anticipated. Humanity wasn't asking for a place among the galaxy's apex predators. They were quietly demonstrating that they had always been the apex predators. Everyone else was just beginning to understand what that meant.